Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anyway Whatever podcast. I'm your host, Mike Fisher, and today's guest is author Bob Plante. Me and Bob recorded this episode early on in my recording schedule, and the schedule being what it is, things get shuffled around. So I'm happy to get this episode out, but we talk about Bob's upcoming book, which is about 80's heavy metal and the tape trading scene from the 80's, which I was a part of myself. And we talk about Bob being a transplant from the East Coast and the differences between East and West Coast culture. It's a good talk. Bob's a super smart guy. And yeah, I think you'll like it. If you are watching the YouTube version, please hit like, share, and hit the subscribe button if you want to keep getting updates on future episodes, which I'm sure you do if you don't already. And if you are listening on the audio version, you can subscribe wherever it is you get your podcast content and give us a share if you think there's somebody out there who might like what we got going on. The show's picking up steam and our audience grows every single week. Yeah, you can find us on social media at Anyway Whatever Podcast. On Instagram, my personal Instagram is at Maximum Fluoride. AWP_podcast on Twitter. So yeah, check out Bob on the other side of the jump. Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Mike Fisher, and today in the studio we have Bob Plante, author and graphic designer and collector of all sorts of interesting movies and music. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing good. It's getting hot here in Southern California, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm in the desert. Very hot.
Yeah, Bob is an East Coaster who moved out to California, in particular the high desert in Palm Springs a few years ago. And one of the things that me and Bob talk about online a lot is his perception of California culture and the mood of the West Coast and Southern California versus upstate New York, where he's from. Where exactly upstate are you from?
I'm from about 3 hours up the Hudson, an old Rust Belt city called Troy. It's in the Capital District near Albany. Kind of the opposite of where I live now. And culturally, weather, and a lot of ways you can think about. We moved out here about 6 years ago.
Yeah, wow, it's been that long.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that you bring up is that there's I think the best way I can quote what you said, kind of, paraphrasing, is you said that there's like an underlying tone of like doom in Southern California that you don't really get on the East Coast. And I always thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, it's like the way I describe it is like an aura of menace over the Southwest, and it was just a feeling I got. It's tempered a bit since I've lived out here, but it's almost like the way I describe it is like I can understand crime in the Northeast and kind of know where it comes from, but out here it's almost like a nihilism to it. Like it just feels different. It's just cold blooded. Like there's like a darkness out here that I don't feel back east, and it's completely subjective. And I have to also say, I love living out here. I wouldn't live out here if I didn't like it. But it's just a vibe in the air that's just different than back east. It's very hard to describe, but
yeah, no, I get that. I think I kind of in our conversations I probably have mentioned, but I think maybe I kind of attribute that a little bit to the fact that this was the Old West. It was part of the Wild Wild West, and I don't think the rest of the country and I think the rest of the world people have a very weird idea of what California is really like, and I think everybody thinks it's like the TV show, the OC, or the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and that's such a teeny tiny part of what California is like, that it still, I mean, you go 20 minutes outside of any big city in California, whether it's San Francisco or Los Angeles, and it's farms, it's mountains, it's rural, and especially out when you get into the desert where you are, it is almost still the Wild West in a lot of places.
Yeah.
Maybe Palm Springs is pretty settled down, but you don't have to go more than a few miles outside of city limits before it gets rough out there.
No, you got your known kind of meth labs that are not too far outside of town. There's still the Wild West vibe out here. I know that police enforcement in general is a lot more lax out west than it is in the east. I mean, you can't drive on a major highway back east more than a few miles without seeing like a state trooper or something like that. Whereas out here, it's like as long as you don't hit anybody, you can do whatever the hell you want. It's and Palm Springs itself is pretty cosmopolitan in a way, but also there's a huge homeless population. I think California has 25% of the homeless in the country, I think, was the last I saw.
Palm Springs isn't unique in that problem when it comes to California. That's a whole can of worms, the homeless problem out here. But Palm Springs, it was developed as like the oasis away from Hollywood for the Hollywood industry in the 1950s and 60s. So I think it still bears a lot of that resemblance.
What it was the back in the Hollywood studio system, that most actors had a clause in their contract that couldn't go more than 100 miles away from Hollywood. If they come back for reshoots or whatever, something like that, they had to come back and be within driving distance. So, and they kind of made this like their little getaway here. And for whatever reason, the paparazzi pretty much left it off limits. So this is where they could come here, drink, smoke, screw around, gamble. There was, a lot of speakeasy type joints and a lot of illegal gambling operations. The Chicago mob was big here. They're still here, apparently. And everyone's it was like a neutral territory as far as like you couldn't get shaken down.
Yeah, it's almost like a mini Vegas in a lot of ways, especially now that we have Indian casinos out there and stuff. There's actual casinos in it, so it's kind of like a quarter size Las Vegas. I've been out through Palm Springs a couple times. I've never spent a whole lot of time there. I know one of the things we're friends on social media, and I check out your pictures and stuff. I know one of the things that you and your wife ride your bikes around Palm Springs, and you'll take pictures of different pieces of property. And, you seem to have an affinity for mid-century modern home design and stuff like that. And I thought that I always like looking at those pictures because I also have an appreciation for that design style. And being in Southern California, it's like huge. It's everywhere out here. Even if the neighborhood that I live in is has a lot of mid-century. The inside of my house is, very mid-century modern. The outside looks like a fucking a chalet from the fucking German Alps or the Swiss Alps or something. Yeah. But on the inside, it's all very mid-centuries, even still, because we were lucky. We bought our house and it was it had been mostly left in its 1959 interior, the fixtures and stuff. The bathrooms still have the original sinks. They're that nice pink porcelain enamel. Yeah. Like everything's pretty much the way it was in 1959 on the inside, which is great because it's still in good shape, and we're just kind of polishing the edges on it so that it's a little bit more like what we want. But yeah. So I love when you put those pictures up, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's this is like one of the capitals, if not the capital of that style of house. It's what happened was it got really popular right here. There's a few architects who moved out here and really ran with the whole style, which I describe as the Flintstones meets the Jetsons. It's like futuristic using primitive material, stone and metal, glass. And what happened was back in the 70s and 80s, the town kind of run down. It was a lot of the rich white people moved down the valley towards Rancho Mirage and Palm Desert. And luckily, developers did not get a hold of all these houses. They kind of just sat until, I'd say, in the 90s. Primarily LA's gay population moved out here and discovered this kind of treasure trove of cheap housing, beautiful housing. They came out, they started fixing it up. And all these years later, you have an annual, actually twice a year now, they have Modernism Week, which attracts, I don't know, 200,000 people or something like that to the Valley that come and do tours and lectures and parties. And it's great. And I mean, my personal interest in it, I kind of attribute to, we're about the same age, and you probably had cable growing up.
Sure.
And back in the 70s, you're a kid, you watch all these reruns of shows from the 50s and 60s, and all these people lived in these houses. And so there might be kind of like a nostalgic comfort level to it, I guess. You're comfortable in these places. But also as a designer, you look at it and go, Jesus Christ, these houses are just designed so beautifully, just clean and simple and smart, compared to like where I'm from. It's, you know, neo-colonial McMansions and vinyl siding and like really tacky kind of like cookie cutter developments. And this was a breath of fresh air when we first came out here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to make a point about the whole, you know, the comfort of having watched all that stuff on reruns is all those things were shot in houses in Southern California. So, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, it makes perfect sense that you come out here and like everything looks like what you grew up watching on TV. And that is, as a person who likes Los Angeles and really likes living here, I love that about it. Like, you know, you watch movies and you're like, oh, like I totally know where that is. I've totally been to that place. You know, that's right near my house. Like, you know, me and my wife are watching the TV show Bosch right now, and we're watching like season 6. Season 1 was all in Echo Park, was like all filmed like in Echo Park, and that was where we were living at the time. And so it was like, oh yeah, you know, that's where I buy, you know, a Coke every morning when I walk the dog. And then you know, now this season they're out in the San Fernando Valley, like most of, like a bunch of the filming is like the sets are like, you know, within like 2 miles of where we live now. And I love that about LA, just seeing all, you know, being familiar with the places that are in movies and commercials. And I love that.
Yeah. And, you know, not being from here and moving out here fairly late in life, you know, probably was in my mid 40s when I moved out here. I'm not jaded as like a lot of native Californians would be to the, you know, whole industry. And I'm still actively trying to stay a fan. So, you know, if I meet somebody famous out here, I'm not going to act like a goofball or anything, but I do like to just go up to say hi to people if they seem willing to do it. I meet a lot of famous people in Palm Springs all the time, and I'd like that, you know. So
you and your wife go to a lot of the movie galas and movie events in Palm Springs. I see you posting pictures, and you get a lot of selfies with people at those events. And I feel like those are places where they're sure they're going to have to deal with that. I know just living in Los Angeles proper, and I talked about this with a friend on another episode. You run into famous people at the grocery store, and I'm a person who tries to my best to leave people alone in the wild. But if I'm at an event, and you know, if I'm at, like, my wife works in TV and films, and if we're at like a rap party for a TV show or a movie, like, I'll talk to everybody. I'll jam everybody up about whatever it is. But like in the wild, like if someone's at the grocery store, I'm not the type of person who's going to be like, hey, it's like they're just trying to fucking shop. Like everybody else.
You kind of read the room, you know?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
If the vibe is, can I leave me alone? You leave me alone. If not,
I do love that you and your wife seem to genuinely enjoy that part of your life. And I think that's really cool. And I think it's cool that you're making the most of the fact that you live in Southern California, and that you put yourself in a position where you can appreciate that.
Yeah. And being just kind of a student of film and doing a little bit of writing about it over the years, I might be able to just talk to some of these guys about obscure movies they might never get asked about. You know,
You know, Bob has an insanely deep well of information about the obscure, whether it's music or films. And you used to write some stuff about film for magazines and stuff back in the
Yeah,
day?
here and there for like fanzines. I think the main one was Psychotronic Video Magazine, which was a pretty big zine back in started in '89 up through the 2000s. I did career interviews with a couple of stuntmen, director, actors, which coincidentally sort of became models for the Brad Pitt character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Guys who worked on low budget, like Al Adamson movies that were shot at Spahn Ranch, and they had to deal with the Manson gang while they used them as kind of gophers for the movies and things like that. So yeah, a little bit. I also want to just say that I kind of dabble in a lot of things, so I have a little knowledge about a lot of things, and pretty much every subject you're going to touch on that we'll talk about, I have friends that are like a million times deeper into those particular things.
Right.
But my problem is I can't focus on any one thing. I'll be into exploitation movies for a while, then I'll dig deep in those, then I'll get back into music, and then I'll go back into design. My brain scrambles day to day that I can't just stay locked into one thing for a long time. I don't know if it's I get bored easily or it's just too many interests and not enough time in the day.
Yeah, I mean that definitely seems to be, there's a certain type of person, and I think it's people who have good, interesting taste that seems to be a common problem. Especially with us creative types, we get passionate about things because we have good taste, inherently have good taste, and our taste in things matters to us. And so, you can't just find that one thing and, stay interested in just that one thing for too long before it just, your eye wanders something
Yeah, I admire
to
the people
some
that
new
can do that.
shiny object,
Yeah, I admire somebody who can just oil paint, and that's all they do all day.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't be locked into that one thing. I'd love to be able to learn to do that, but
yeah, I guarantee you though, whoever, even the people who just oil paint, they have good taste in there, and they have other obsessions that are a different thing. To go back just really quick, and you mentioned the Spahn Ranch. The Spahn Movie Ranch was, and for anybody, I don't know who couldn't possibly at this point in American culture not know the reference to Spahn Ranch. It was where the Manson family lived in the 1969 when they committed the Tate LaBianca murders and the whole Helter Skelter Charlie Manson stuff. And they lived at Spahn Movie Ranch, which was formerly where they shot all the old Western TV shows like Gunsmoke and a lot of old Western movies. There was a bunch of Western ranches in Southern California where that stuff did. Spahn Ranches happens to be one of them, and it was kind of run down like Bob had said, and the Manson family kind of took it over. And
yeah,
it is the site of the ranch is about 2.5 miles to the west of me from here, and you can still drive up Santa Susana Pass, and right where somebody came and burned it down.
Okay, I was going to ask you what's the state of it these days.
Right, yeah, not too long. I think in the early 70s, like 70, 71, someone just burned that whole entire complex to the ground. Which is, on the one hand, it's a bummer, but at the same time, given the climate of the time and the extremity of those crimes, I think it shouldn't be a very big surprise at all. But what is in its place now is a humongous Christian church.
Oh, wow.
And so there's really the only thing that's left there of any that you can actually, kind of go and visit is along the creek. There's like a famous picture of the Manson family in this little small shallow cave. It's like a little rock overhang. That Manson cave is still there, and kids still go there and graffiti on it and smoke pot and stuff. And I've driven up through there and stuff. It's just a place, and I'm not the type of person. I don't believe in supernatural stuff at all, and so even though I don't, it's just a weird feeling to be like, wow, like such a significantly menacing fucking crime was committed by people who this was their regular, this, like, there still seems to be some weird fucking energy. And I don't know if it's, you put it out there when you're there because you know what the place is, but I think it lends a little bit to where we're talking about the menace of Southern California,
Yeah, I mean, there's the saying, "LA darkness is the blackest darkness," and it's almost like it must be like a contrast, because in your mind there's this kind of like the sunny, beautiful place with palm trees and like the carpenters and Orange County moms with the looking out through their kitchen sink window and a nice lawn, and everyone's rich, and but in reality, it's to contrast that you also have film noir. Going back to the late 40s, which was incredibly dark, much of which took place in LA. You've got kind of like, it's a major metropolitan area with a proportional amount of crime.
Yeah. Although our crime rate in the last 10 or 15 years, our crime rate has like dropped dramatically. So we got a lot less of that now, especially with the gang related stuff. They threw a lot of money at the gang problem in South Central and East LA, and that stemmed. I mean, I think it broke the generational cycle of the gang situation to a greater extent. Yeah. But I mean, I don't know where that quote about the darkness comes from.
I don't necessarily believe it, but
really fantastic. I don't see it. It's like I grew up in Northern California, and I lived in Hawaii for a little while. And with bands, I've traveled all over the country, and it's just a place like any other place. It's the second largest metro area outside of Manhattan. And so it's just going to have, what else is it going to be but that, if what I mean?
Yeah. And it's, like I said, it's pretty much subjective, this kind of feeling. And of course you go anywhere, and what you end up finding is just 95% of people are just like anywhere else, just trying to make a living, just trying not to get hassled, just trying to do their thing, not be bothered, not bother anybody else. That's pretty much what it is out here too. So
yeah, I just want to go on record right now, and I don't have anything against Orange County, but I do not consider Orange County to be part of Los Angeles at all. They are two completely different types of culture, like completely. Like Los Angeles County and Orange County, there is very little similarity in the type of people who want to live in those places, and the type, there's nothing wrong with Orange County. It's fine. I like it. I'm an annual pass holder at Disneyland, so I spend a lot of time in Orange County. My main airbrush supplier has been down there for years, and so I'd spent time in Orange County, and I love it. It's beautiful down there. It's just a different vibe. It's way more of what most people in the world think Los Angeles and Hollywood is like, is what Orange County is.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Surfers at the
more
beach,
conservative,
bikini girls, everybody, it's way more of that. And LA's a lot more, it's a lot more artsy fartsy than Orange County is. And, so I think it's.
Well, culturally, there's going to be just like a million times more things going on in LA. I'm still trying to get a handle on the sort of like divisions within California.
Yeah, I wasn't throwing you under the bus on that. There's a lot of people who think that Orange County, that even statistically, when somebody quotes a statistic about the greater Los Angeles area, it always includes the numbers for Orange County. So it is kind of technically considered the greater Los Angeles area. And when you include their numbers into Los Angeles County is like 3 or 4 million. But when you add in Orange County, it gets up to like 11 million.
Yeah. They'll throw in Riverside too.
Sometimes you get Riverside County, and I'm right near the northwestern most corner of LA County. And so, we get all the way out to here. And the biggest portion of Los Angeles County population is actually in the San Fernando Valley where I live. And so we get underrepresented, even though we have the biggest population.
So that's kind of where, like, if you want to live in LA and you want to kind of raise a family, but still be accessible to LA and everything it offers, you kind of will move up to the valley. Is that right?
You go out to the valley. It's you can afford, houses are about half the cost. The trade-off to living in the San Fernando Valley is that it's, if you want to go down into downtown or Hollywood or Silver Lake or any of the neighborhoods where all the cool stuff happens, it's going to take you an hour to get down there. So it's not like it's super easy to do. And, you know, a lot of the industry people live out here in the valley because, you know, you can actually buy a house and the schools are good for your kids, you know, but, you know, you're commuting. You know, my wife, when she's on a TV or movie production and she's down, you know, I'd say 75% of the commercials filmed for every company that you see on television are filmed in downtown Los Angeles, especially car commercials. Almost every single car commercial that isn't for a truck is filmed downtown. And so, you know, she's going to be sitting in traffic, hardcore LA traffic for, you know, an hour and a half in the morning and, you know, an hour and a half or so at night. So that's the trade-off to the valley, unless you just move over the hill to Burbank. But then, you know, that's still as expensive as living down in town. So, but we live way, way out. You know, we're a good 30 miles from downtown Los Angeles. So, getting, you know, and there's no gigs out here really. So if I want to go see a band, it's a commitment for me to go see a band. That's your day. Yeah. It is a whole day and night, you know, and it's not, you can't Uber, you know, it's just too far and expensive to Uber. So, you know, you're not having no beer at the show or, you know, or you got to, you know, convince your wife to not drink so that you can drink or however, you know, you got to trade out, you got to do the trade-off. So that's, you know, I actually love it here. I was just reading, you know, I'm building a YouTube channel, so I'm having to like spend a little bit of my day every day just on YouTube working on it. And, you know, as I load things up, you know, it gives me suggestions of, you know, you should watch this and you should watch that. Just the way the algorithm works. And, and it's funny because this morning, like right before we got on, I was like doing some changing out some graphics on my page, and there was a suggested video about this YouTuber girl who is like a really kind of well-known YouTube person, has hundreds of thousands of followers, and she's like, LA's overrated and I'm moving out and here's why. I'm going to tell you why. And I was like, good riddance. We don't need you. If you can do what you do somewhere else, go do it there. You know what I mean? If you can't appreciate what LA brings to your life, you're just not living properly here. And that's a thing that, you know, I talk to people about when they're like, I was in LA for 2 years and I hated it. And it's like, you got to know how to live in Los Angeles to not make it completely ruin your life. Because I've never had any of the negative things that people say about Los Angeles other than traffic. I've never had any problem with you. There's no way to avoid traffic. You do learn how to live with it, and so it gets less annoying, but there's no way around it. There's no way around LA traffic. But all the other shit, like, you know, fake people or, you know, all that, like, I never encounter any of that shit. It's like anywhere else. You just find your people and you just stick with them, you know?
Yeah, I'm still trying to get a handle on LA. You know, I like it so far. But it is different. The traffic thing, get to that. You got a lot of traffic, but I tell you what, traffic moves here. At least when there's a lot of cars, everyone's kind of going slow and moving, and they're leaving 5 spaces between each car. But if you're back driving the Long Island Expressway back in the East Coast, it's totally different. It's speed and slamming your brakes, speed, slamming your brakes, and then stop for about 10 minutes. Everyone, the styles are different here. People drive kind of in their own world. They pretend you're not even there. They're not even going to look at you. Where in the East Coast, one is super concentrated. I do so much traffic as there is. I find it actually a little more relaxing than trying to drive in heavy traffic.
We have to go back and do that. You timed out really bad during that whole part between the long. Just start with the Long Island Expressway, and then we can go back forward from that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. With traffic, I find it actually not that bad compared to back east. Drivers back in like Manhattan area or anywhere back in the Northeast are super aggressive. They're going to want to get around you. They think you're driving too slow. They're going to do everything they can to get ahead of you, cut you off. It's start, stop. You slam on your gas, you slam on your brakes, then you just stop for 10 minutes. Whereas out here, there's heavy traffic, but it's always moving. There's like 3 spaces between you and the car in front of you. Everyone is kind of in their own world. They pretend you don't exist. Or, you can't flip. The only thing you can't flip people off out here. It's like back east, it's just like a good morning. You give somebody the finger. It's like, okay, whatever. Everyone does it. It's like no one's bothered by it. Where out here, that's one thing I've had to temper a little bit is obviously people are less direct out west.
Sure.
Not everybody, but some people get almost offended. Whereas, if you're from Boston, New York, Philly, so there's a kind of ball busting culture that exists. That's how we communicate with each other. Whereas out here, people take it literally. And not everybody, but some people get like super offended if you just bust your chops a little bit.
Sure.
But no, it's like that means we like you. If we didn't like you, we wouldn't even talk to you. This is how we kind of, communicate with each other. And sometimes, so that's we had to kind of hold my tongue a little bit for the first few years that I was out here and get adjusted to that. Because I bet, until you find out the people that are okay with it, that you can kind of relax around that. Yeah. Or when I get people from back east to come out and visit, then we can relax and bust each other's balls and get it off our chest.
Out here, you definitely have to be friends first before you start doing that. That can't be how you interact with somebody and tell your friends. Once you're friends, then all bets are off, and you can do that. But you don't come at someone that way on the West Coast out of the fucking gate, man, because people be like, the fuck is your problem, buddy?
Do that to the wrong person and end up getting shot at out here. So,
which is another funny thing is that, around the rest of the country, people think that, it's just a bunch of liberal snowflakes in Southern California. And like literally every single person I know, even like my hardcore, fucking socialist Democrat friends, everybody owns a gun out here, and the mistake of these red states thinking they could just walk right into California and take it over without any problem is a fallacy.
No, we never owned one in our lives until we moved out here, and guess what, we did, and now we're both trained. I have a accommodation and marksmanship and everything since moving out here, so we fit right in. If you this the West, you got to own a firearm.
Again, it goes back to that whole West thing. Well, I'm glad you're out here at this point anyway. I'm glad you enjoy it. I wanted to move along a little bit too. For the last 10 years or so, you've been working on a book, and you have a book deal with Bazillion Points that does books about music culture, heavy metal, punk rock, and other music culture, and it's operated by a guy named Ian Christie, who is like, that dude knows a lot about, he's forgotten more about heavy music and underground music than I will ever know.
Yeah. It's, we've been friends for a long time. He had a metal zine back when we were teenagers and like tape trading. And I'll get into what that was. And I did some artwork for him, covers, which I used to do a lot for zines around the world. I would do logo for him, illustrations, things like even reviews I would write for some of them. And you get to know people. And so we've kind of been friends. He was living in Indiana at the time and kept in touch sporadically through the years. He became a writer and was writing for a lot of print publications back in the heyday of print. And he wrote kind of a history of metal called Sound of the Beast that did really well. And he ended up setting up his own publishing company. And his first book, I believe, was a reprint of the Swedish death metal book. He did the English version of it. It's right here.
I have a copy.
It's a great book. Beautiful, it's just like oozing with 80s tape trading vibes. And what that was is basically, obviously before the internet, demo tapes back in the day were just pretty much sent into record companies by bands. They would just go in with a 4-track or whatever and record a few songs. They'd send them to clubs to get gigs. But then all of a sudden, the culture of underground tape traders that was trading live shows back in the late 70s started trading demo tapes by bands, mainly the new wave of British heavy metal bands that were coming up, but then also these kind of really early American bands back when we used to be called kind of power metal, which was like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest amped up a little bit.
Sure.
And it really exploded when Metallica came out with their No Life Till Leather demo. All of a sudden, it just kind of like the Ramones. Any place the Ramones played, you had like 10 bands were inspired in that city to form. It was the same thing with anybody who got a hold of that demo tape seemed to want to start their own thrash metal band.
Sure.
And then when Slayer came out, that was even bigger. Just like there's a million Slayer clones back in the 80s.
Yeah.
So it happened.
Metallica and Slayer were the two bands that pushed me from punk rock into metal. Like, because it was at a time when the hardcore punk bands were tired of being hardcore punk bands and they were starting to mellow out a little bit. And they were either getting more mellow, like bands like 7 Seconds kind of went more of an U2 direction, and some other bands like that did. The Husker Du started moving in more of a melodic type of direction, and then some of the other bands just started going towards the metal side of things. But there was a couple years there where it was like like Ride the Lightning was more hardcore than most of the hardcore punk bands. It was faster and more aggressive, and it just caught my attention right away, because I'm just, for me personally, all of my life, the thing that gets me the most excited about music is music that goes fast. Like, the faster it can go, the better for me. As I gotten, now that I'm 50, it's starting to slow down, and I kind of spend a lot of time listening to, jazz and funk records a lot now. But for most of my life, and even still now, like, you put on fast music and I get excited immediately about it. And so for me, it was an easy sell thrash metal. Because there was like a discord forever between the punks and the metal people, and metal dudes rode BMX bikes and punks rode skateboards, and never two shall the twain meet. Other than bands like Venom was always a band that punks liked, and Iron Maiden, Motorhead and Iron Maiden were two other bands that were like acceptable metal bands to like, but that was pretty much it. And then once everything started crossing over, it was, for me, as a person who liked both, it was great, because I could go to a gig and I would get a little bit of metal and get a little bit of punk rock, and it was like, the shoe fit my foot really, really well in that regard. And so
it was huge. I mean, bands like DRI and Corrosion and Conformity were starting out as straight hardcore bands, and they brought in metal influences, and it just became a big blender, a stew of every kind of variant. Metal bands that went completely hardcore bands that went completely metal, and then everything in between. And then you had the first beginnings of grindcore, bands like Repulsion, initially known as Genocide, that were taking influences from like Siege, super fast hardcore bands like Siege and Larm, and some of the Swedish bands that were like super intense. So,
anybody who knows me at all, as a person or even as an online entity, knows that I think all of the best bands in the world come from Sweden, and that is across genres. I think they have the best rock and roll bands. I think they have the best death metal bands. I think they have the best grindcore bands. I think they have the best heavy metal bands. I am a Swedish music fanatic, and so it's none of that was a hard sell. I latched on to Swedish death metal like day one. I think I was involved in the tape trading scene that you were mentioning, and that's what your book is about. And so I came to that through Mitch Harris of Napalm Death, who at the time was in a band called Righteous Pigs, and I met him at a show in Southern California. I'd come down to watch some of my friends' bands play a gig at Fender's in Long Beach, and me and Mitch just happened to be in the crowd together, and we started talking, and then we started tape trading, and that's when I started getting bands like Napalm Death and Repulsion and those bands. He started sending me those tapes, and I was like, holy shit, like, this is even faster than like Metallica and Slayer, and it was like immediate, and like and when I got like a Nihilist demo, which is the band that turned into Entombed, and to this day Entombed is pretty much my favorite heavy metal band.
Mitch was a huge tape trader. He was super well connected. He was out of Vegas. Obviously, just moved as a kid, moved to England to join Napalm Death. Just think about how his family felt about doing that. It's just, they didn't know anything about underground metal or anything. So my son's moving to England, join a band. I mean, what the hell is this? So anyways, yeah. So this kind of, it was a thrill to kind of be exposed to that. At first, you just realize it opens a door to this gigantic menu of music out there that was like underground. You couldn't read about it in magazines. It was almost like a secret society. So this develops through the years, and I kind of got burned out on it in the late 80s and started to get into other kinds of music. But then after I saw the death metal book, he had in the back of it was a section that kind of had a listing of every death metal band. And I'm thinking, I just saw a light bulb went off in my head thinking, what if you took this format and made a sort of a document of every single metal band that released a demo tape in the 80s? Of course, if I knew how big it was end up being back there, I would have stopped right there, because I've devoted 11 years of my life pretty much on a daily basis to putting this book together. But I just threw the idea to Ian. He said I would love to publish something like that. So I got to work doing it, and here we are today. I'm still working on it.
I know you had
going well.
You had sent me about 5 years ago. You'd sent me like a draft of it, and it was already 2.5 inches thick, and I was like, Jesus Christ, Bob.
Yeah.
What do you?
So it's going to be a massive book. I mean, I'm thinking it's going to be a big, like, hardcover Bible looking thing. You're going to need a lectern to read it, you know. But it's just taken this long just because we know how pedantic metalheads are.
Sure.
Once the book is out there, it will be poured over. Every word will be dissected. Every fact, every
claim,
date, everything will be examined and audited like a forensic audit. And so I have to make sure that every single thing is correct. I can make it. It's not going to be, I don't call it the complete encyclopedia, because there's no way I'm ever going to get every band, because
right.
they're coming in every day.
Well, I mean, you didn't know about my band. You didn't know about my band, and I sent you my band's demo, and you're like, "Yep, I had no idea. I had no idea about this." And I'm sure that happens to you like daily.
Almost daily. I find new stuff. So at some point, you just have to cut it off once you're into production.
Sure.
But I think obviously the most important bands will all be in there, and everything else will just whatever fits. Well,
the last time you mentioned, how many bands do you have listed as of right now?
Yeah, it's about 9,000 bands and about 14,000 individual demo tapes that I know of.
You're listening to every tape and reviewing it.
I have audio for about half of those. Wow, so I have to review all of them, and I have to do it in a consistent voice. I have to give an honest review. That's one thing I'm trying to do, is not sugarcoat any of it. Give it a brutally honest review. There's some bands that everyone absolutely hate. I'm not a big fan of funk metal, and the stuff just like turns my stomach, and I'm going to write it that way. Okay. But also, I want to like everything, and part of the thing that's kept me going this long is I discover great music all the time. There's a lot of demos that just went under the radar until today, and you listen to them like, Jesus, this is so good it could have been pressed up as a record. People would have bought it.
There was a band in the tape trading days that actually put out records, and for some reason they just never got anywhere. They never stuck. Was the band Soothsayer. And I was like, man, why aren't these guys a really big deal? Because they were so good. And that's the thing you just touched on a little bit, is like, for people like us, finding out about new music it is like, there's nothing cooler than that to music aficionados, and not even just metal people. Like, I like music, and so for a long time I kept it pretty narrow. As I've gotten older, I've expanded the space that I'm willing to let new things come into. I still don't like any reggae music really, and I don't like country music traditionally. There's a new wave of country artists that harken back to the 70s, like
earthier stuff.
Yeah, like Coulter Wall and Neil Vincent Emerson are two artists that they are country music, and I listen to them a lot, actually. If you haven't heard either of those bands, go look them up. I'll probably throw a link to those in the description of this episode. Good stuff, you know. And the other thing that I've found is that there's like a whole new wave of funk bands, like metal guys who decide they want to play funk music. Bands like the Budos Band and like the Bastards of Soul, who are out of Texas. And I've been listening to a lot of that for the last decade, and you know, I'll know.
Yeah, what was that band that Scott Carlson posted the other day? It sounded like a 70s Italian cop show funk band. I'm going, geez, I thought it was an old soundtrack, and it was
Scott Carlson from the proto grind death metal band Repulsion. He's a Southern California guy. He's kind of part of my friend circle. I run into him every now and then. He's a super nice dude. He's one of those guys who likes all kinds of stuff. And after in the break between Repulsion and Repulsion getting back together, he was in a band called the Super Bees, a garage rock band called the Super Bees, who are really, really good. And I don't remember the name of the record. I just remember that he posted it, and the cover art was so good I almost died looking at it. It was just such a cool cover, and I was, you know, I'm a sucker for that. That's like, you know, that is why I really decided to become an artist as a kid, was looking at my, you know, pouring through my dad's vinyl record collection and looking at all the cover art. That and, you know, Saturday morning cartoons and Looney Tunes were what pushed me into animation. But album covers, like, even now, like, I'm so glad vinyl has made a comeback, because as a designer and as a fan of album covers, the CD cover was just a fucking bummer. It was too small to do anything.
5-point type. You have to shrink everything down, and just like there's no room for really enjoying or innovating, or, you know, it's just not a big palette to work with.
It was a rough 15 or 20 years for me in that regard. And now, you know, I started collecting records again, and I don't even have a record player. I just want to have them, you know, to have the art, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big thrill for me. You know, I never stopped. You can see all the records back there.
I was just going to say.
I never stopped buying them. I never was a big CD guy. I have a lot, but I just never got rid of my records. That was going back to the book. I never got rid of any of my metal fanzines, and those are part of the kind of primary research I'm using for that book. Right. But with records, that's another thing I'm just into. It's just a fun vice to have.
Sure.
To go anywhere I travel, I look for records, and just things pass through here. I kind of deal them, you know, on the side a little bit, and that's another great way to discover new music. Is I listen to everything that goes across my desk, and you discover, like, who is a good reggae band or who is a good country band. And I just was never a funk guy growing up, but I just started hearing like these 70s jazz funk records, and it's like, damn, this is actually pretty good. I'm kind of liking this. The more I hear it, and you end up filing that one away, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to go check out what other bands sound like this. So you start investigating, and it opens up a whole new kind of vein.
Sure. Yeah. I use, anybody who listens to this show knows that I'm a huge Spotify user. And so, you know, a lot of times Bob has like this, he posts different records and different songs. He has these regular posts that he does on his Facebook page. Like, it'll be like pop music tracks from the 80s, like just saccharine crap that we grew up listening to, or it'll be some cool, like, weird album cover that, you know, I've been turned on to so much really cool music from Bob by him just posting stuff, and then I'll go find it, and then I'll find it on Spotify. And one of the things that Spotify does is great is it will always have related artists to whoever you're listening to, or things that sound similar. And then if you expand on that menu, it's people who listen to this band also listen to these bands. And you can just spend a day finding all these, like, new bands you never have ever heard of, like, in any kind of music. It's the Spotify library has gotten to be very impressive.
Yeah, I might have to actually, you know, jump ship or whatever, and roll on that, but also it's like, I've kind of been putting it off as, like, Jesus Christ, do I need another input of another stream of, you know, it's like I have hundreds and hundreds of records I haven't even listened to yet. Maybe when I'm done with those, I'll give it a try. But it might be good for, like, road trips and things like that.
Sure, so, yeah, because you can just stream while you go. So what do you see an end in sight for the creation of the book? Do you have an idea of when it will be out? Because I know there's a bunch of people who listen to this podcast, who listen to metal music, who will want to be able to get their hands on a book like this. Any kind of idea when you'll be done with it?
Hoping next year. It's it's kind of like the material is going to tell me when it's done, and it's really just physically getting through all the material. But I am making progress, and so we're hoping we're starting to work on the design and production, how it's going to look. So I've been going through and finding a lot of material to put in the book. It's going to be visually, as my background as a designer and an art director, I don't want it to look like a phone book.
Sure.
So I want to sort of combine really kind of elegant design with the super raw Xerox 80's demo cover vibe.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of has to, right?
yeah. I just wanted to ooze that 80's, handmade flyer and fanzine look.
Yeah, so. That's how I cut my teeth as a graphic designer, was just starting to do stuff for bands like that. And I'm not sure if I ever sent you the J card. I know I sent you the tracks for my old band. I don't know if I ever sent you the J card for that cassette, but I can scan it and send it to you if you need it.
Absolutely.
But it's like, it's just a photocopy collage of a bunch of shit that I found in clip art books and, stuff I drew, and it fits in very well with that same vibe. And when we touched a little bit on the whole crossover scene, and one of the things at the time was my band was made up of like half of us were like from the hardcore punk scene, and half of us were from like the new wave of British heavy metal scene. And so we kind of just melded together, and so we were kind of shooting towards the metal side of things. And I was at the time became friends with Steve Von Till of the band Neurosis. At the time he was in a different band, but he recorded my band's demo. He had like a 4-track recorder, and we became friends. We had like a really short, intense friendship when we were like 17 or 18 years old, and he recorded the demo for my band, that demo that I sent you, and then he joined Neurosis, and Neurosis went from being, they went into being something, a legendary band that I think, as far as influential bands of the last 30 years, I don't think you could probably point to, in the underground extreme metal, a band that was more influential than Neurosis has been. Yeah,
they started as just another kind of scrappy East Bay Gilman Street hardcore band, and then
hardcore band.
They incorporated these almost like Swans type of like super doomy, heavy, low, slow vibes, and then almost introducing these melodic elements to it later on, and just expanding out from there. It's really interesting to watch them evolve over the years.
And all the bands that sprang out of their sound, like bands like Mastodon and ISIS and all these bands that kind of, it's often referred to as post metal, and I fucking hate that. I hate any genre of music that starts with the word post, because I think that's a false way to look at anything. Like post hardcore, post metal. I do not like that.
It's not describing the music, it's describing when it happened.
It seems almost derogative to me. Like it seems derogative to me, almost like it's like, well, it's just
better than metal.
It's maybe it's a little pretentious, and I don't know any band that is classified that way who calls themselves that, just for the record, which says everything you need to know about that. But just their influence on, like, it created a whole genre of music that, it heavily influenced the doom metal stuff. Because initially doom metal has a lot of traditional heavy metal influence. And then Neurosis came along.
70s sounding.
And Neurosis like crusted up the doom metal, and now you got like that doom crust stuff, and I listen to a lot of that stuff.
That's good. A lot of that stuff's going to be in the book. I mean, really inclusive about it, including the British bands, like the bands that were sort of like under Napalm Death's wing, or even before that, Axe Grinder and Amoebics and Hellbastard and Ripcord and all those kind of crusty,
Heresy.
Exactly.
Concrete
really
Socks.
Crusty, yucky punk bands that were part pseudo grindcore.
Yeah.
So
Electro hippies, I think, were part of that.
yes,
And then out of all of that, we got Napalm Death and we got Carcass, two completely different entities that are, still fucking juggernauts to this very fucking minute in the extreme metal scene. We touched a little bit on your, your knowledge of movies and music and books, and you're also have been a graphic designer. You were an art director at a textbook company, I believe, on the East Coast for a long time. And me and Bob know each other from gigposters.com. And if you listen to this show, you've definitely heard the term gigposters.com. And I don't like to dwell too much on it because I don't want to beat that dead horse too much. But that's where me and Bob know each other from originally, and we were discussing kind of in the pre before I hit record on this, we were talking a little bit about how crazy it is, the amount of talent that was on gigposters.com, and in the decade since it kind of went away, what all of the different artists on there have done with their design and art careers. And
it's I basically kind of worked a day job most of my life. I spent a couple of years doing freelance, decided I liked knowing where my discretionary income came from. So I went back to do a day job.
You had a habit to support.
Exactly.
You had a couple of them.
I need constant media coming into the house, and then it takes money. But, it's a decision you make. And we talked about this before. It's trading freedom, the illusion of freedom versus the illusion of security.
Sure.
Freelance versus day jobs. But I've always gravitated towards day jobs. And for a few years, I was an art director at a textbooks publisher, an educational publisher back east. And I had a large budget, and I had to crank out, book design after book design, including a lot of covers. So I would hire designers from the gig poster community. And it was a great community. This was kind of before. This was at the peak of kind of message boards.
Sure. Before social media, when message boards were social media.
Yeah, Facebook kind of put the knife into most of those because you can sort of curate who you dealt with more versus having to deal with a lot of people you didn't like on a message board.
Precisely. Why it worked really well for me.
Yeah, but it was just a great community of a lot of different styles, and to me, it's just been interesting to see where a lot of these folks kind of branched out into fine arts, into high-end design, into merchandising. You were into doing goalie masks for a while, and painting and everything.
Yeah.
So that's been interesting. But I remember, I don't know if it could have survived all this time, but because message boards seem to have a kind of natural evolution. They end up dying out after a while. Sure. It's sort of like self-imposed forum police come in and will just kind of wreck the place. But at its peak, it was just fascinating in that we get so abstract. I mean, you talk about memes that fly around, and just this level of humor would get so abstract. There'd be sub-level, under sub-level of humor, where you'd get these just kind of brilliantly funny people would put out an image, and it would be just a commentary on so many different levels on things on the subject itself and previous commentaries. And it was so inside that I've described it before. You have these sort of malevolent websites now, like 4chan, and these kind of evil actors that send. This is like a benevolent version of that. People were so creative within that community. It was just a fun place to kind of it would be almost like the place I would check every morning before I did anything else.
Yeah, for sure. I would spend pretty much all day there. For people who aren't aware, Gig Posters was a website that showcased rock posters and gig flyers and anything like that. And it really started as a very small project by a guy named Clay Hayes in Canada, where it was like a school project for him to just make a website that was about something that he liked. And so he reached out to me randomly, found my old punk flyers on my website at the time in the late 90s, and asked if I was interested in posting stuff on there. And I think I signed up for the message board, and I think I was the third registered user
Wow.
at gigposters.com. And then I didn't really use the message board. I tried. I wasn't familiar with the format, and it wasn't really, there wasn't a hot spot at all. And then I came back after a little while, and there was probably a couple dozen people using it, and I'm still in contact with every single person who was in that first batch. And like you had mentioned, like the nice thing about social media is you can just curate your friends list, so you don't have to deal with the people that you don't like from the message board. And that was like always a killer for me. And at the time, it lasted about 10 years. It was probably 99 to 2009. And the real hot spot for it was probably between 2002 and 2006.
Yeah.
And, I don't know that there's ever been in the history of art a community with that many working artists who were achieving results at that level for that length of time, like in the history of art. It was really an incredible thing. Like, you have the Dutch Masters, and there was a time period where there was a lot of, but there just couldn't have been we're talking about like 1,000, 2,000 incredibly talented.
Yeah.
And not like there was 1,000 and 50% of them were half-assed. Like it was like 1,000 or 2,000, multiple hundreds of really high-level artists, designers working all over the map, from like real conservative design to insane psychedelic freakouts to, gore, whatever you needed. It was available there, and it was impressive, and it created, it was a career maker for at least 20 people that I'm still friends with now, who are still professional artists to this very minute because of it. And I am one of them for sure. I couldn't have had any career as a freelance graphic designer and illustrator the way that I have if it hadn't been for that. It put my work in books that are in the National Archive, and you know what I mean? Like,
I don't even do that many posters, and I'm in books from that. I just dabbled in it. And really, when you say it that way, it's almost like a virtual equivalent of like Paris in the 30s. When you look at now in retrospective, the level of designers, the people where they've gone to, where they've evolved to, and this is where they kind of sprang out of. It's like, geez, what a wellspring. And, we weren't all in person, but we're all there kind of like percolating. The forum probably is dead and should stay, but I do wish the archive of posters, that was another aspect of it. It was tens of thousands of posters going back decades.
It was incredible.
It was a great kind of reference. I wish that would come back.
I think espresso beans is probably the next closest thing as far as an archive is concerned. Like I've been on espresso beans looking for some of my older pieces to show people or just to have to post on social media, and they have stuff of mine on there that I don't recall even putting up. I don't know that I actually ever put anything on espresso beans on purpose. I think every piece of my art that's up there is up there by somebody else's hands. So, if that might be a way to, it's just, I've always had a hard time navigating that site. I just never thought that functional UI navigation was very good on that site. Whereas Gig Posters, it was fantastic, and it was always getting better. Clay did a fantastic job with that website for a long, long, long time. And I know my exit was facilitated by just strictly business. He had to find a way to make money doing it, and it turned into, that just wasn't where I wanted to go with it. So I bowed out, and then I just went straight over to, MySpace, and then right after that, Facebook. And so I can just have my own little world where I don't have to deal with moderators or any of that kind of shit,
Yeah. Probably healthier.
Yeah. Well, Bob, I appreciate you coming on, and I'm really excited about the book, and I'm always excited to see what you're posting on your Facebook page all the time. Do you want to give out your social media plugs where people can find your stuff? Because you need to go follow Bob. You're going to learn something from the stuff that he posts on his Instagram or, on his the website for his book. There's Bob's as much as anything, Bob's an educator on cool and interesting culture stuff. So where can people find you?
Mainly to keep track of the book at facebook.com/demolition book. I'm always posting updates. I'll post things I'm looking for, old zine covers, YouTube links to great demos. And every once in a while, I put together like a hour-and-a-half mix of all the best demo tracks from the demos I've listened to recently, and I'll post it up there to download for people to check out the actual music that I'm writing about. So mainly follow me there. You'll get regular updates and kind of the status of the book, sample reviews, things like that.
And on Instagram, it's Hypnotic Eye?
Forbidden Eye.
Forbidden Eye, there you go.
Yeah.
And that's your Instagram account?
Yeah.
And I know on there, like you kind of put like obscure record stuff up there quite a bit, right?
Yeah, that's kind of like a casual, fun place. I'll have to double check the address. I don't even remember it. We can always put it up later.
Yeah,
but
I'll go back.
Like
I'll put something in the intro bumper with all of your social media. I usually have people do it right up front, so instead of at the back end. And I just wanted to get into chatting with you, and I totally fucking spaced out on doing it. So I'll do it in my intro thing. I'll do my intro. I'll put it in my intro thing because I want people to follow you and pay attention to what you're doing because you're doing really cool stuff all the time. You're doing really cool stuff.
Got to keep the brain fed. That's just like it's just a never-ending hunger for brain food. That's all it is, right. You know.
Yeah.
Boredom. It's just to prevent boredom.
Right. I know for me, a lot of it is I work constantly, and I always have projects all over the place, and I have to constantly feed my inspiration, and I need to. And so following people like you is just a really good source of like. You know, you'll put up an album cover that's just bizarre, and it will make me have to think about it. I will have to confront how weird it is, and then that's important to me because it starts getting my mind thinking about things in a different way. Because you know, as an artist and a designer, sometimes we get in a trap of like, this is just how I do things, and so being exposed to something that's so different, that was approached so differently than how I might approach it as a designer, it's important to me as in my creative life. And that's the great thing about the internet to me. And people complain a lot about social media and stuff like that. And I actually really love it because it's a constant way to find out about new, cool, interesting things and be inspired. And you can easily remove all the political, static and, all the social, cultural, static. If you just spend a little time doing it, it's not hard to do. And then you can kind of turn your social media into whatever you want. And my experience with social media on the daily is almost always positive because it's full of people like you who are putting creative and interesting things out into the world. And of all the things, I appreciate that the most,
Well, thanks, Mike. It's like that's the same thing with me. I just look for people that find cool shit and say, here, check this out. You might like this too. And that's pretty much how it boils down.
Right.
I know there's other people out there who like this stuff, and I find stuff and just want to share it, and you get inspired by it, and that's I still am a visual artist, even though I devoted all these years to this book, and I have banked up a lot of visual ideas, and I can't wait to get the book done so I can get back to doing that.
Right. So. Right. I bet. And I'm sure your wife will be happy when it's done so that, that's not such a constant part of what of what your guys' life is. I know. Happy birthday to your wife. I know that she just had a birthday yesterday. So you say happy birthday to her for me, even though I don't really know her. But I know her vicariously through social media.
We never met. It's a funny thing about the internet. We've known each other going on 20 years.
Right.
Virtually, but never met, even though I'm only a couple hours away from you now.
And then you moved out to Southern California, and we still haven't met. But
yeah,
I'm a fucking
busy
hermit.
guys.
I'm a hermit, man. Like, all I care about is like making stuff, and everybody in my life and in my friend circle and my they have to push on my buttons to stay connected, because I'll just stay in this art studio and fucking wall myself up and just make stuff all the time if people don't poke me to go do things. So I totally, it's a character.
Yeah, we're all kind of victim to that trait.
flaw.
Yeah, it's all part of our makeup as creative people, visual artists. I mean, I think writers have it even worse. I mean, when I'm trying to write, to get into such a zone that it's totally different than visual. And frankly, I don't know how some of these writers that write are like novelists. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah,
that's a special talent.
They sacrifice their entire life. They get hooked on cocaine and alcohol. You know, like the age-old story. You know, rock stars do it to enhance their performance, and fucking authors do it to fucking get the job done.
Yeah, black out the world, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Not to stereotype either of those professions.
Never.
All right, Bob.
We
I'm going to let you.
Visual artists because we are those.
Yeah, so. Sure. You can always punch down or punch up. You can never punch down, right? Isn't that's I think that's across. The rule. Yeah, or in our case, punch across, I guess. I'm going to let you go, Bob. I appreciate you coming in, and you're welcome to come back anytime. And especially when that book is done, I want to have you back on to talk extensively and solely about that book, because I'm really looking forward to it.
That's good, Mike. Appreciate it. Hopefully we can do it in person after all this crap is over.
Yeah, once the pandemic, so we can. Yeah, because I want to start having people in. The original idea was to have as many people in the art studio to record in person as possible, and via Skype was always going to be a secondary method. But you know, being things as they are. You know, I guess it is.
Do what you gotta do.
It is what it is. I'm just happy that people want to come on and talk to me, and and so I'm enjoying it, and I'm making the most of my shelter in place time, I guess.
Yeah, it's been fun. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll talk again soon, Bob. Thank you.
All right, thank you.